My name is Nelly, and I will be the moderator on behalf of UniMy Prep team. And our speaker today is Scott Edinburgh, who has been an MBA admission consultant for 14 years and has helped hundreds of applicants around the world to get in the top MBA programs. So I'm very eager to hear what he has to share, and I'm sure it will be very useful for many of you. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box and he'll take the time to answer at the end of the session. If you have any problems with the sound or presentation, you can switch to Zoom up by clicking the button on the left corner of your screens. So I think everything is set now, and I'm giving the floor to you, Scott.
Great. Well, Nelly and the broader Udemy Prep team, thanks so much for having me here, and thank you everyone for joining. Hope you're all doing as well and safe as you can be these days. So I'll give a little bit of details about personal MBA Coach, a couple slides about what we do, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation, how to develop winning MBA essays. So we're kind of top ranked on some of the leading consultancy websites. I've been a presenter at the annual GMAT conference before. Overall, we have a 96% success rate, and our clients got in with $6.5 million in US scholarships last year. We have former M7 interviewers on our team, as well as former admissions directors from Wharton, UCLA, and Columbia. Our newest director is Nicole, who just left Columbia Business School just about a couple months ago. We're family operated. I run the company with my sister, and everyone can have one-on-one support from a senior admissions team, so we don't have any kind of junior staff or support. And we have a project management system that helps you to think through everything. So a little bit about the team. So myself, I went to MIT for undergrad, studied economics and business at Sloan, was a TA, teaching assistant for one of the MBA courses as an undergrad, and then worked at Deloitte in consulting for a few years, and then went to Wharton for the MBA. On the AGAC board of directors, so AGAC is the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. And we do different things with admissions directors throughout the year. There's a conference every year with all the admissions directors. And at that conference, we're usually analyzing these fake profiles, and we actually debate who's getting accepted and rejected and why. So it's a little bit of a behind the scenes look to see how they make their admissions decisions. And I'm generally giving them presentations as well. I'm joined by MJ Shores from Wharton and UCLA, and Nicole Shea from Columbia. And then my sister Erin kind of runs the company with us and used to work at Bain. So what do we do? We can help you throughout the entire application process, right? If you're early, some of you are thinking, if we were in person, I'd say raise your hands and tell me if you're applying this year, if you're applying next year. So for some of you that are applying in a future year, we have these early planning packages, and that's really designed to help you to think about what you want to be doing to make yourself better between now and when you apply. And then we have tutoring. So we have some of the best tutors in the industry, in-house software that we use to guide through the tutoring sessions with modules, sample questions, thousands of answers. Our folks do really well and raise their scores on average of 90 points. And of course, comprehensive packages where we're working through the essays, the resume, interview prep with a lot of former interviewers. So that's a little bit about what we do. Now, for those of you thinking about applying this year, I'll go through some details here as far as some things to consider. This is a bit of a timeline, right? So we're here a little bit past kind of mid-May, towards the end of May. If you are thinking of applying this September, you see that it's coming up soon. So you should be working on some of these items like GMAT or GRE, shoring up your recommenders, thinking about the resume, thinking about essays. We'll talk about all that today. I might talk a little bit about some resume slides as well. And for those of you applying in a future year, look at all the different items that you have to do, right? So maybe your grades are low, you want to take some additional courses, right? Best to get those done in the fall. Think about schools, school selection, April, May, June, July. We used to have school visits on here, and of course, nobody's visiting schools today, but maybe visits will open up next year. So how to develop your personal story, right? Whether you're in early planning stages or you're applying this year, thinking about your story ends up being pretty important. And this is often the hardest part of the process, right? So who are you and what are you about? So let's have a little bit of an exercise here. And these are two profiles, right? So one is Jenny and second is Michael. Now read through this for 30 seconds or so and think about which one has a a better or more unique personal story. A few more seconds to read through this. Okay, so in this instance, we actually like Michael better. Now, some reasons why we like Michael. If anyone wants to, weigh in, does this surprise anybody? Feel free to type it in the chats if anyone's sort of surprised by this. We like Michael better because the story is a little bit tighter. Now, we made this difficult on purpose, right? So Jenny went to Yale and has a 3.8, so GPA is higher, GMAT's higher. Seems like Jenny might be plus, females do really well. So it seems like, Jenny might be better. But, we like Michael because from an interest standpoint, right? Interest in swimming. So swam for many years, competitive swimming. Then on the side, teaches underprivileged kids how to swim and has, mentored some teens. So that interest is really combined with the extracurricular. And then he did some work on like major technology clients, wants to build product management expertise in consulting, and then maybe run product management at a technology firm. So that all really kind of falls in line. Whereas with Jenny, a lot of different clients that she did work with, music interests, but did some junior achievement work, which is like education mentorship, not really related to music. And then you maybe have like work in a tech startup, although we haven't done any work in tech beforehand, and then digital media down the line. So it's a little bit harder to tie the different pieces of the story together. And that's why we actually like Michael a little better here. And again, as you have any questions on all this, type the questions in the chat feature and we'll answer all of them at the end. And if there's anything burning, just say, I'd love it to be answered now, and maybe the moderator will kind of stop me and ask questions in the middle. So how to think about self-reflection, right? You can list out roles, hobbies, activities, even as simple as I like to play table tennis, right? That could be an activity. I went to undergraduate with the kid, I still remember, and the like weekend away before we started school, this was before MIT, and he said, so how did you get into MIT? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, my in was table tennis, and that was my whole story, and that was my sort of passion. So that can certainly be a way to get into school. Think about your passions, think about what separates you from others, and also the circumstances that help to shape the choices that you've made. Some schools actually ask how you've made the decisions along the way. So start to think about some of this. Now, when you're thinking about a theme, right, they must appear in multiple aspects of your application, meaning you don't want every part of the app to talk about something different. You want to have a cohesive message throughout. And the theme should be really relevant to your essay topics. So don't underestimate this. Sometimes people get lost with the theme and think about what is my why me theme, and then they go to apply to a school and the school asks a question that has nothing to do with that theme. They don't really give them the opportunity to talk about that theme. So make sure that it's related to the essay topics. And at the end of the day, be ownable, right? So take a stance. You don't want to be like everybody else applying. So you want to be you and figure out who you are. And that's the, the sort of ownable theme. So what are some examples, right? Maybe career aspiration, maybe some family, personal family background or circumstances. Travel could be interesting if there's some really interesting experiences, and maybe through travel you learned about communication, you learned about photography, and you now communicate through photography. Could be something negative, right? Maybe a loss or some kind of a tragedy, or an extracurricular leadership that you see people are building houses here in the middle. Maybe that taught you about real estate and trust and teamwork, and now you're taking that back to your work where you're helping to manage different interns, and you sort of tie everything together. Some themes to avoid, right? Being hardworking, studying abroad, having commitment. If you think about it, how many of you would be hardworking and would be committed to something, right? Probably all of you would raise your hands. So best to avoid themes that many people could have in their stories. So the different parts of the application process, we'll talk a lot about essays, but I also just wanted to throw in a couple quick bullets on the resume, because the professional resume is different from the business school resume. Professional resume, right? It's going to show employers that you have specific skills needed to do well at that job. Business school resume does not care what skills you have specifically. They care how you've employed those skills, how you've led through those skills. They want to see how you've done your job better than others, and you want things to be transferable. So this is what a resume might look like. Now, if your resume doesn't look like this, that's okay, but this is a good format. All of our clients use this format. So hundreds and hundreds over the years, everybody uses this. And the main reason is it's very clear, right? So you have like company up top, then you have another company, you have bullets underneath. Now the bullets are maybe 2 lines, per bullet. Try to avoid 3, 4, 5 line bullets, but you also don't want many bullets that are just 1 line. So what should a resume do? Right, resume should highlight, and for those just joining, I'm Scott Edinburgh, founder of Personal MBA Coach, AGAC board member. I've been working in admissions for the last 14 years, and our clients have the highest success rates in the industry, and our clients get in with some of the most scholarships. We had over 6.5 million last year. What should a resume do, right? Highlight key strengths, show leadership, results, right? Results are really important. And again, prove that you've done your job better than others. All the resumes need changing. So I would say everybody here on the line will need to make changes to the resume. That just happens with all the applicants because business school is different. Right? Avoid jargon. You don't want multiple pages. Now, this is for full-time MBA. If you're applying to an executive MBA, you can have multiple pages. You can have 2 pages for an executive. But for full-time, you just want 1 page. You don't want any bolded words or too little white space or anything like that. Okay, so next, letters of recommendation. We'll briefly go through this, and then we'll get to the essays, right? So recommendations, right? Think about who will write an amazing letter, and at the end of the day, that's the most important. So title, prestige, seniority, do not care. All I care about is somebody that knows you well and will write very strong things about you. So ask your references early. I was talking with a client this morning before this webinar. Excuse me. He's applying in round 1, and he's already asked the references. All right, he's going to ask them today. And so timing-wise, you always want to think about finishing applications at least 4, 5, 6 weeks ahead of a deadline. You don't want to rush the content and ends up weakening it, and you need the recommenders to be ready when you want them to be. So what's important for recommender? Specificity, recency, honesty, and detail. So I won't read all the bullets. Excuse me. I'll probably have them share this presentation afterwards, but I'll talk about the last 2, honesty and detail, right? Honesty, you want the letter to be true and truthful, which means you've done some things that are not great in your career. And that's fine. Let's talk about them. Let's see what you've learned from that. In detail, I need to know real specifically how you have done the things that you've done and why you were different from somebody else. If you have somebody writing a letter that's very generic, even if it's positive, it might not work too well. Okay, so now the meat of today's presentation, essays, right? Essay writing is a multi-step process. First, you brainstorm. You never want to open up a Word file and just start typing an essay, right? Think about what ideas you might cover. There are many different ideas. Think about how personal a school wants you to be. Is it a school that asks a very cut and dry essay? Or do they really want passion? Do they want to know that, it was 2004 when you were walking down a long, dark alley when you first realized the importance of X, right? Maybe that works for some schools, maybe not. Then you want to outline. So once you have an idea, draft an outline. Figure out how many words should you be devoting to each section of the essay. Again, if you just start writing straight away, you might write too much about the past or not enough about the future or whatever it might be. So outlining is always good. And if you are working with someone like us or another consultant, they'll help you with this, right? And make sure that you're writing at the exact level of detail. Often people are writing sentences that are too long or too short, or the points aren't connected as well as they should be. So definitely outlining is important. And then of course, draft, editing, and proofreading. Those are more obvious. So these are some guiding principles for essays. Answer the question asked. This seems silly, and you might wonder, why am I logging onto this webinar? Let me get off and go have a drink. But answering the question asked is really important. And oftentimes people veer a little bit off, right? It's not the case that we see clients that just blatantly will talk about cats and dogs when they get a why MBA essay. But if they get a question that says, what are your goals post-MBA, and how will Columbia Business School help you to get there, which is not that exact wording, but what are your goals for the next 3 to 5 years? And what is your long-term dream job? That's what Columbia asks. Sometimes people just write a lot about what they've done. They're like, let me prove to you that I'm so strong. And so I'm going to tell you all these great things that I've done. But if the school doesn't ask you for that, right, make sure to keep that in line as you're kind of going through it. And then write authentically. You know, the essay should fit with your personal story. They should be succinct. So I'm blabbing, right? I'm just talking and talking because that's what you're here for. But you don't want to be blabbing in your writing. So you want things to be very succinct, short sentences. Language should be approachable. This is not where you're writing Pulitzer Prize winning essays. Yes, on our team, we do have graduate English professors that teach writing, and so you'll have one of them as your main editor if you work with us to help you to perfect the writing and make it as strong as it can be. But still, it's very approachable, right? Basic language. Not the time to impress somebody. Those kind of really, really creatively written essays don't work. They should be really thoughtful and really thought-provoking, but not like super, super flowery. And when you can, pick topics that can be unique. We'll talk about that in a minute. So these are some common essay categories. Maybe a personal story, maybe a goals or a why MBA essay. So Harvard has a question: as we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School MBA program? And then Stanford, what is most important to you and why? So some personal story errors, right? Too much detail, right? So what do I mean by too much detail? You have to tell a story. And if you have 600 words to tell your story and you're spending 150 of it to talk about, Jim and what he did on the accounting team and how that really made you feel uncomfortable and why you needed to go and create a new plan, you maybe just wasted 50 words there. So don't go into too much detail about any one particular item. And then more commonly, right, essays that are too vague or don't have a theme. So if I read the full essay and at the end of it, I can't tell you in 10 seconds what you're trying to say from the essay, then you threw too much in there. You should be able to read an entire essay and then in less than 10 seconds say, this is the main point of the essay. And so that's kind of a check for you to have. So these are some why MBA essay examples or goals examples. One is, how will the Booth MBA help you achieve your immediate and long-term post-MBA career goals? So very specific, right? You're going to Booth. What will Booth give you in order for you to be successful after school? And then Wharton says, what do you hope to gain professionally from the Wharton MBA? So it's not terribly different from Booth, but it's slightly different. And then Columbia, again, I mentioned the Columbia essays before. So note, these are all essays from last year. So depending on when you're watching this video, these are not the 2021 essays. However, I don't envision any of these changing. So I think you'll still be writing all of these essays. And we're actually starting with some of these schools already with clients. So we're well underway for round one. If you're thinking about applying in round one, and you're still considering hiring a consultant, definitely reach out soon. We're kind of well underway at this point because some of these standard essays don't really tend to change from year to year. So how to answer this why MBA/goals essay? Your goals, again, as mentioned earlier, they should be specific and ownable. You want to consider short-term and long-term goals. Don't forget about that. Right? One goal is right after school. What's the job? And I don't mean, what are the things you're going to do at school or eventually that you would like to be CEO of Amazon. What's like a realistic job after business school? That might be an associate at an investment bank, product manager at a leading tech company. Like that's the type of detail that they're looking for here. And then long term, 7 to 10 years out, what's that longer term path and how to connect the short term to the long term. Now, as you're writing this essay, you do want to consider what skills you might gain during the MBA and how you will apply them in order to be successful in this goal. And don't forget to name specific things on campus. I hate reading bullets. It's really boring, so apologies. But you want to get very detailed as far as what you're writing about for the school so that they see that you didn't just copy and paste this from another school. So do your research, chat with students. So these are some essay deep dives. This is Harvard, right? And we talked about this question already. What are some things you could include? Maybe you're talking about a passion of yours. Perhaps it's an issue you've overcome, a lifelong hobby that you turned into your career. There are a lot of rules around Harvard, a lot of things you could and couldn't do. We'll only go over some of them today. Others we'd have to have more time and sort of more formally, engage to be able to go over that. But at least in the time that we have today, right, ensure the topic is exciting. I'll say that again, the topic should be exciting. This is not like, here's my story and here's why I rose to be a great leader at Accenture and now is what I want to do at Harvard and the classes I want to take and why I want to be a partner at Accenture afterwards. That doesn't make a good Harvard essay. You want to think about a theme, right? There has to be some kind of theme, something that's exciting, that draws them in. At the same time, you're not throwing everything in there. So this isn't like what I did from age 5 until what I'm doing now at age 26 or however old you are. Lengthwise, 600 to 1,000 words is typically what kind of makes a Harvard essay complete. Wharton, what do you hope to gain professionally from the Wharton MBA? You want to establish some career context, right? Talk a little bit about what you've done. Not a lot, but a little bit. Again, talk about both short and long-term goals, and then discuss Wharton and talk about things that you want to learn at Wharton. So this is a very high-level overview. We don't go into as much detail as far as exactly how you do it, but this is the structure. It's important to think about this because some folks, if you take nothing out of this free webinar, it's that you really want to devote specific amounts of space to each of these items. So you're not like skipping over anything. And again, being very detailed is what works here. So save time for these last minute items in the application. So let's talk about short answer questions. They should not be called short answer questions. They should just be called questions. Some of them are not that short, and so they take quite a while. If anybody's applying to INSEAD, we do a lot of work with INSEAD. We have a former INSEAD interviewer. That's a long application. Take INSEAD and Michigan Ross. INSEAD's probably 5 times the length of Michigan, and will take you 5 times as long. So if you are applying there, great school, you should certainly apply. Just budget your time, right? They have a lot of short answer questions, which again are not short. Share your completed essays with your recommenders, if you can. Now this bullet is on here. I don't create my own slides, but to be honest, I've always debated having this bullet on here because you don't have to share your essays. If you want your recommenders to get started now, to be ahead of time, then that's fine. Just share your resume. But if you finished your essays and then, let's say you're done with all your essays by the end of June, and then your recommenders are going to start and the later summer, yeah, it's not a bad idea to show them what you've written. Make sure to have somebody read through this that's not familiar with what you're doing. Even with Personal MBA Coach, right? You have your main consultant, which could be myself, the founder. You could have a former admissions director, M7 director. Then you'll have a key editor, graduate professor. So you're having like a lot of talent to make sure their essays are perfect. And even with us, we have a separate proofreader that comes through at the end, who doesn't know you at all, has never met you or read anything that you have, just to proofread. So make sure to have somebody that doesn't know you go through and just catch any little typos that you have. The last thing you want is to submit an application with a couple errors, and that happens. So what are some things to avoid? Right. Well, we'll talk about goals for a little bit. Having illogical career goals. What this means is your goals should really make sense. So there are 4 different ways that you can pivot. One is by industry, one is by function, one is by geography, and one is by language. So if you pivot all 4 of those ways, you have to really think about why you're explaining that, how you're explaining that, I should say, and why it makes sense for you. So I had a client who's now at MIT, I guess graduated from MIT, and he wanted to do some work in healthcare. Hadn't really done work in healthcare before. And there was a personal reason, right? So I'll leave it at that. This is a public and recorded webinar, so I won't go into more details, but there was something personal that sort of convinced him to go into healthcare. We really had to prove that story because otherwise it just seemed like, that's the thing to do. And, why not write about it? But there was actually a reason, for him. So if you are making a pivot that doesn't sound logical, think about how you can, kind of prove that that's the right path for you. And again, in general, be decisive and be specific. This is not the time to wishy-wash and to say, I'd like to do A or maybe B, and I'll go to business school to figure it out, and I'm not sure. If that's how you feel, that's fine. Get some help from somebody to make sure that you can feel differently, to have a very clear path in mind. And again, right, we talked about rec letters. CEO does not need to write your rec letter. So I have that in there again to just sort of dispel that myth, because a lot of people say, well, I can't ask X. Even my client today, I said, well, the senior person is just one level above me, so I probably can't ask him. Who else should I ask? I said, why not? Why not ask him? If he knows you and can talk about your experiences, why not? Another pitfall is not including school specifics. So I will spend some time on this because this is pretty common. You want to avoid vague statements that could apply to school. So as you're writing your essays, and say you're writing about why you want to go to Booth or London Business School or wherever it might be, if you're writing something that the director's going to read and think, okay, well, LBS can do this, as well as INSEAD, as well as Columbia, as well as Oxford, and as well as Cambridge. That might not be the best thing to write. You want to write something that's very specific, even if it's not maybe their biggest strength, right? It could be something that's a little bit of a differentiator. Avoid complimenting a school, right? If you're going to compliment a school in your essays, then one of two things happens. One, either you're saying that they're really good at something that they're actually not, and that's probably the most common. That's the most common thing that we see, anyway. And I'm like, actually, they're not that good at finance. So I don't know that I would say, you want to develop your finance expertise at a leading finance institution if the particular school is not that, or they are good at it and they know it, right? So if you apply to Harvard and you talk about the case study and why it's so amazing, and you're just kind of complimenting them, it's probably not going to get you anywhere because they know that they're good at the case study. So for those just joining, I'm Scott Edinburgh, the founder of Personal MBA Coach. I went to MIT for undergrad, Wharton for my MBA. I've been running Personal MBA Coach for the last 14 years. Our clients got in with over 6.5 million scholarships last year. Here we're just talking about essays and other topics. Show research and interest, right? Show them why you want to go to their campuses. So it's not enough to say, this is the class I want to take and what I want to do at that class. It's like, what draws you to that school? Think about it. When you're applying, schools want to take people that they think will enroll in the program. So they might be thinking about whether you'll actually go. And if you don't prove it to them, then they might not accept you, even if you are a very well qualified candidate. Because yield is pretty important. Okay. So the other one is having a vague reason for wanting an MBA. So if you're a consultant, and if we were in public, I'd say, raise your hand if you're in management consulting. I'd be like, I'm sure you're all going to get an MBA, but everybody's sure that you're going to get an MBA. So you have to have a reason for why it makes sense, for you specifically. So really think about that reason, and level set, where you are and what knowledge gaps you have and how the school will help you to close these gaps. Try to avoid terms like strong fundamentals or business knowledge. What happens if you use terms like that is it just doesn't impress anybody. If you want to develop business knowledge during your MBA studies, great, you and everybody else in the world. So again, think about what makes sense for you specifically and being detailed. So is it like, I want to be a better marketer, I want to develop some financial acumen, I want to figure out how to evaluate mergers and acquisitions better. Next is lack of consistency. Think about this like a puzzle. Okay, each part of the application is a different part of the puzzle. And if written well, they'll all fit together and you can see the puzzle at the end. If they're not as consistent, you'll have a hard time putting the puzzle together. Make sure that you're genuine also throughout the whole process, because they'll know if you're not. You're going to go into an interview, and if you have this perfectly worded essay about healthcare, and then they ask you 10 hard questions about the healthcare industry, and you are, out of luck because you don't really know, right? So just be genuine throughout the whole process. So last year, our clients got into, all the top schools. We work with all the European schools. So here we've got LBS at INSEAD, also Oxford, Cambridge, ESA, IE, IMD, and then all the top US programs. We'll also do Canada as well. So if you're looking to go anywhere, we can certainly help you. For those that joined late, this is a little bit about what we do and what we have at the company. And so what is this process? Now, this is both good for someone who's looking for a consultant, and also for someone who's not looking for a consultant, just wants to know how does the process work and what are all the different components. First thing might be test prep, right? GMAT or GRE tutoring, or the executive assessment, we should add. So if you want some support, we have some amazing tutors, in-house software that we're using to guide through the sessions. Our folks do really well. And we guarantee that everybody's happy or your money back. So it's kind of hard to lose. Now, let's say you're doing some work on your own. Think about 2 to 4 months to prepare for the exam. You can certainly do that while doing essay brainstorming and story development. Or if your schedule is super busy, then maybe you want to do that first and then do the essays afterwards. The reason we have story development before we have school selection is because your story might impact the schools. Meaning, if there's something that you want out of the program, and there's a school that's really good at giving you that, that could be a reason why that particular school is right for you. So best to think about what you are, who you are, and what you want from this process, and then you'll start to narrow down on the schools. Then resume work, right? So you want to be removing industry context, focusing on high-level takeaways, improving the quality, making sure the resume is as sort of closely aligned for business schools as it can be. And then essay development, right? So we'll send you samples and guides that shows you what our secret sauce is. We tell you 100 words here, 200 words there. We've cracked the process and really tell you what's different about all these admissions directors, what they're looking for, and that's how to maximize your chances of getting accepted. And then, of course, you're editing the essays. You're getting recommendation guidance, and then we're doing interviews. So we have a lot of interview guides for all the schools. Sample questions that you'll get asked. We have like former group interviewers for those that are looking at any school that has a group interview. And this is the contact information. So if you're interested in getting in touch, feel free to reach out. And now we'll go to the questions.
Hello again. Thank you very much, Scott. I think I've heard a lot of valuable information. Indeed, we have some questions for you. Okay, let me start with the first one. Hello, from what people should the recommendations be? Could you give us your advice?
Sure. So recommendations, they should be from ideally somebody that you're working with in a professional setting. Like your immediate supervisor would be the first choice. And that way that supervisor can really talk to your performance. They've evaluated you, they've given you raises or maybe not raises, and they can really talk about why you're good and what specific things you've done relative to others. Now, if you're not comfortable asking somebody at work, well, let's start with if you're not comfortable asking the boss. If you're not comfortable asking the boss, somebody else at work could also be fine. So let's say you're doing marketing work, and if you ask the marketing director, they're going to know that you'll leave and they might not promote you, and so you don't want to sort of let the cat out of the bag. Maybe ask somebody in the finance department who happens to know you, you have a close relationship with. Easier back when everybody was in office all day long, but still, those are the people. Now, in some instances, you could have a external sort of reference come from a extracurricular activity that you've done, the head of your church or something like that. If you've had enough impact, then that certainly could be something. You want to avoid college. Never ask anybody from college, no professors or advisors or anything like that from the undergraduate experience.
Thank you very much for answering this. There is another question. Hello, can you give us a few more examples of topics, information that we should avoid sharing and can actually present us in a negative light?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, what should you not talk about? I mean, sometimes people have different weaknesses that they've overcome, and they're not sure how to best approach those. So if you're prone to having disputes at work and you talk about, how you resolve all these conflicts, in some ways, depending on what that is, that might cast a bit of a negative light if you're someone that's prone to maybe not getting along with folks. I would probably avoid things that are really generic, right? So immigration and assimilating into a country, let's say, right? The reason why something like that might not be the best thing to write about is because probably a lot of people have had experience with fitting into another place. So unless there's something that's really specific about what your experience was, the school might not be as impressed with the fact that you moved from country X to Y and got to know the local language and culture, just because a lot of people have done that. Not that that's not impressive, it certainly is, but it's more common for folks who have done that in the applications. And then the last thing I would say is really something that's too hard to follow, right? So at the end of the day, admissions directors are very busy people. They're extremely talented readers, extremely smart, very, very busy. So let's say it's 6 p.m. and you're the last application that they're reading, and it's it's sort of convoluted, worded, and there's so many things that you're writing about, right? Just make it simple. Easier to say what matters to me is healthy eating, and here's why, right? And not try to have this whole long story. So those are a few thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we have another question, a big one. what makes the essay stand out? You already said a lot, but if you can just sum up or just give us your best advice.
Sure. Yeah, so essays that are really honest stand out. Essays that are really succinct and clear stand out. One of the biggest things that we do to fix applications, and whether this is from other consultancies that then they switch over and come to us, or people that apply on their own, is take something that's just not, it's clear enough that if you read it, you'll understand what the person's saying, but it's not well done. The items aren't all tied together as perfectly as they can be. So someone that connects every sentence, makes sure that every word is needed to use. There are two tests that we use for writing. I'll give away kind of two of our secret sauces, let's say. One is we ask people to highlight words. Now, what does that mean? If you're writing an essay about goals and you highlight every word that talks about your goal in yellow and every word that does not talk about your goal in blue, see what that essay looks like. If it's a hugely blue essay with a little bit of yellow, you failed, right? So you really want to think about that balance. And then, the other thing when it comes to, what was I going to say? So yeah, the other thing, it's really the ability for these essays to be, read by multiple different people across backgrounds. So it's having the context, right? Having the right level of detail, but not making it too detailed, because someone reading this essay might not be an expert in your particular field. So those are a couple other thoughts.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. In your opinion, how important is the essay in relation to the whole application? Can my essay make or break my application?
Yeah, good question. So I would say they're pretty important. The answer is yes, it absolutely can, and almost always does make or break an application. Because what happens is, let's take a school that has a 20% acceptance rate. Okay, so 100 people apply. From these 100 people, about 70 to 75% might be qualified to go, meaning if they got in, they would do fine, they're smart enough, the grades are good enough, they didn't get like, a 240 on the GMAT or something. I don't think that's even possible. Yet, of those 75, they'll probably invite 40 to interview. So 35 people don't even have a chance of getting to the interview stage, right? So now you have these 40 people that have been interviewed. So they already made the short list, all great essays, all good stats and everything. From there, some of them do well in the interview, some of them don't do well. If you're going to fail the interview, forget it. If you don't present yourself well, you're probably not getting into school. That's why they have the interview. Even for those that do well, they can't take everybody. So now they're going to cut people. So if someone has a really strong essay and the next person doesn't, absolutely that could make or break it, and it does all the time. So pretty important, right? As far as weightage and percentage, there's not a specific percentage, right? It is an important part of the process, but there are other factors. There's, obviously where you're from, and what work you've done, and what does the resume look like, and what are your test scores. So they're all factored in together, and schools are looking to make complete classes. So when I talk to my admissions directors, and I do regularly, about like, oh, so what's happened at Columbia, what's happened to UCLA, Wharton, or Harvard, or whatever it is, we often hear stories of like people that get in that don't have the best of X or Y, because the overall package just makes sense. So it's not as clear as saying you need to get a 730 and have an essay that looks like this to get into school, but the essays are extremely important. It's really the only thing that you can change now. You can't change your education, you can't change your you could change your job, but probably you're not going to add 5 more years of experience at this point. So the essays are the biggest thing that you can change at this stage.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Okay, we have another interesting question. Programs questions are almost same or similar in this as years ago. Is there any place where we can have access to past topics of essays?
Yeah, so you can visit our website, personalmbacoach.com. And from there, and don't judge us, we're launching a new website in like a couple days. So you'll see a better one soon. But we have blogs that have the different essay questions, and we have downloadables. And I'm sure with Udemy that there are also resources as well to get these questions. For us, you can download. We have 2 downloadables. One is like M7 essays, and the other is beyond the M7. And so they have all the questions, and they have some of our analyses for how you can think about those. So you can find those all on our website.
Great, thank you for sharing this. There are a few more questions coming in. What would be the better approach and strategy to answer an adversity essay asked in some schools?
Yeah, so adversity is a tough topic to answer, and more and more, whether it's adversity or diversity, these are themes that are coming up in today's life, more and more for many obvious reasons. You want to think about being honest with this answer. And so when you say being honest, I mean having detail. So it's not enough to say, oh, I had XYZ and I'm a cancer survivor and now here I am and like take me to school. Like, what happened with this? Like, what are you doing with this? Are you now helping other people to think through their situations? Give example, make it honest, right? Show names. So just being as real and transparent as you can be, I would say is important. And then set the stage. Prove to me that this experience, really allowed you to demonstrate adversity, and try to not generalize it as much as you can. I know even my feedback is kind of general. It does depend on the situation a lot, but that's as specific as I can get.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, and we have one question related to creativity. It's from a person who is wondering how to have more ideas while creating her or his essay, because he's feeling or she's feeling that the essay could be a little bit empty.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, we have all of our clients fill out this initial information form, which ask them a lot of details like the passions and hobbies and extracurricular activities and why you did something and family background and all that. So if you're not working with somebody on the applications, I would say try to do something like this on your own and force yourself to write just a lot of little details about things, and then go through all this and think, okay, I play badminton on the weekend. So is that something I'm going to write about? Probably not, right? But depending on the situation, you might actually cover some of these. I would just write down everything about you that comes to mind, and from there think about what might fit into the essay. It's a little bit tough to get more specific without knowing what the essay is, but definitely feel free taking some risk with certain questions.
Okay, great. And I think we have one last question. What's your recommendation for someone needing financial aids from the school? Does this prompt any changes in what you just said?
So the way it prompts changes, and we work with this often because, again, we get over 6.5 million in scholarships. So usually people just make money working with us, and our services end up being negative in cost for the additional money that you would get. As we're thinking about this, right, it's two things. One, it's test score. Test score is correlated with scholarships. So get a higher test score. Wherever you are, try to get more points. That's going to be very important. Second is showing them that you're really interested in the school. A school wants to give out scholarship dollars to somebody that they think is going to take it. For the random wild cards that they might or might not even get, they might not assign the funds to you because they only have so much funds in each year. But then really it's just, showing them that you're interested in the school, having strong essays. I mean, you get scholarships based off the essay strength and the test score. Those are the two main, points. So just having a very good application is going to help you with scholarships. And then lastly, apply early, because there's a certain budget at the beginning of the year. And as the months go on, the budget doesn't really get a lot bigger. So I would say, applying early would also be helpful. And all the other things I mentioned would still apply.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Scott. It was a very interesting presentation. I hope it was very useful for our attendees. Thank you very much for attending the webinar. I wish you best of luck in your application process, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you, everybody. Best of luck.